there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thanks for stopping by. We welcome you as well. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen, as always, with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer: I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support, such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to thank those of you who have responded to my questions recently on social media. I so appreciate your willingness to share your experiences and offer answers to those questions. I'd like to also remind you that I do have an online support group through Facebook. And if that is something that you feel might be of interest to you, if you are an estranged mom and identify as spiritual, not religious, and you approach estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and you have a desire to do inner self-work and self-reflection, then I invite you to stop by and give us a try. We can be located at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. And I'd also like to remind you that volunteers are still needed for Ricky Busca's research study for her PhD dissertation. If you are interested in that, please feel free to email me at theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Again, theestrangedheart@gmail.com, and I'm happy to provide you with Ricky's contact information. And finally, I did want to let everyone know that my Patreon membership has been launched, and if you're interested in that and supporting the podcast in that way, you can check us out on patreon.com/theestrangedheart. So let's dive in for today, and let's start with a couple of quotes. The first one: if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Unknown. The second one is: every relationship has layers, some seen, most not. Some layers are healthy, others are not. Think about a plant that is green and appears healthy and strong, yet beneath the soil, the roots are sick and dying long before the green leaves, standing proud, begin to droop and turn brown. Bottom line is, healthy relationships do not end up in estrangement. Kreed Revere. And the third and final one: when parents do their inner work, the result is freedom, peace, love, and respectful connection. Parenthood is a lifelong project, a project that provides experience, change, and growth if permitted. No relationship is meant to be static, and this includes the parent and adult-child relationship. Kreed Revere. So the title of today's episode is there really something wrong with adult children? Or is there some sort of truth? And is there something true and valid beneath the surface? This past week, I was contacted by two estranged adult children. Both are daughters, and I will in future episodes get into sharing at least one of their stories. The other, I haven't asked for permission to share her story, but we'll reach out to her to do that. But as estranged adult children reach out to me, and in the contact and communication I have with my own children, who were, as you know, once estranged from me, and we have since reconciled and have been reconciled longer than we were estranged. I see this connecting thread to all of them. And just like with estranged parents, there's a connecting thread that connects all of them together. And I think these threads are filled with valuable information. And if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I approach estrangement and reconciliation through the lens of curiosity. It was a way for me to try to make sense out of what seemed senseless when I was in the middle of my estrangement. But it helped me to make sense of that in a way that helped me to get out of being stuck and get out of the utter misery and sadness and grief and this feeling of dread, and I can't move forward, and I just always felt like I was standing in quicksand. But instead of it being quick, it was just this long, drawn-out process that I was just stuck in every day, almost as if it were concrete instead of quicksand, and that I couldn't get out of. And I for me, that just, it wasn't working. I wanted to live life. I wanted to live life with joy and purpose and meaning. And so I had to get curious. For me, that was the key. Curiosity was the key. And when I started getting curious and looking into things, I started to see all of these connecting threads. And of course, because I was an estranged mom at the time, that's what I was looking at. You know, how are the rest of us as estranged parents connected? What are some of the common threads and themes with regard to our estrangement from our adult children? And it was, you know, in the beginning, of course, I looked at things being from my perspective, right? And through the lens that I would see life, and not necessarily that of my children. And it helped me to begin to soften. Didn't happen at once, and it didn't happen at the very beginning. It took a long time, but I just stayed the course. And that's what I want. I mean, that's my end goal. My end goal with this podcast is to help people to number one, to help others to feel like they're not the only one, because I felt like I was the only one. But then to get you to move beyond being stuck, to get you to a place where you can enjoy life again, whether that's with your children in your life or without your children in your life. Because you are worthy. All of us are worthy. Our estranged parents and estranged adult children are worthy of having a life that is filled with joy and love and respect and purpose and meaning. And that's the goal of this podcast. Also, I mean, the goal, ideally, and if I could, be bewitched from back in the day, I would twinkle my little nose and have every parent and adult child reconciled in healthy relationships. But I'm not unrealistic. That is unrealistic. It's not every relationship is going to end in reconciliation. So I think that by looking at the common threads, it can help us to lessen the charge, if you will, the triggers, if you will, and help us to move into a more healthy way of living. And so that's what I wanted to cover today, is in what are some of the connecting threads with the estranged adult children, because I think as parents, estranged parents, that's one question I hear all the time is, why are they doing this to me? Why did they choose to estrange? And those that have reconciled oftentimes don't have the answers to that, because that conversation never happens or hasn't happened yet. And so it's super important to try to make meaning. I think as human beings, we That's just inherent in us, is to try to make meaning out of something that seemingly has no meaning. And so one of the things that when I talk with estranged adult children, and the thing that estranged adult parents do not see, and I didn't see it myself when I went through my estrangement, is and I do mean every estranged adult child that I've talked to, that I have read stories about, that I have had any kind of communication with at all, to include my own children, every one of them say, I tried for years to get your attention, to get you to listen, to get them to acknowledge, to get them to change, to get them to hear things from my perspective. And when I talk with estranged parents, the first thing I hear is, this came out of the blue. We had a perfect relationship. And then one day it's like somebody flipped a switch. And so I'm inviting you today to sit in and listen to what I'm going to talk about, and try to open your heart. Try to listen. Try to step out of your shoes for just a moment. You can go right back into those shoes when the podcast is done. But for just a moment, to step out of your shoes and try to look at this, at your situation, your estrangement experience, as if you were someone on the outside looking in. So, estranged adult children tell me all the time, this was not out of the blue. I tried for years to get my parents to listen to me, to try to understand. I swallowed, what they feel is disrespect. I tried to swallow the disrespect. I tried to ignore and pretend that they didn't really mean what they had said. And I had tried, and they go on and on and on about all the things they tried to do to keep the relationship healthy, or to keep the relationship intact. I won't say healthy, but to keep the relationship intact. Children, regardless of their ages, I say 98% of children do not wish to sever relationship with their parents. It's just not something that's in us to do. It's natural to want to be connected to our parents. And so they will do a lot of gymnastics, emotional gymnastics, to keep that relationship going until they reach a breaking point. And oftentimes what appears to the parent as a, quote, minor thing is often simply the straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah, it could have been a minor thing. But I am here to tell you that what is beneath the surface of that minor thing is not minor. It's major, and more often than not, it has gone on for years, if not decades. So, what does this mean? What is beneath the surface, right? How do we get to this place? And my take on this is that our children have experiences and then have feelings from that experience, and then they hear words from parents that negate either the experience, which is called gaslighting. And I know that a lot of parents absolutely come unglued when they hear their adult child say that they were gaslighting the child. And I'm, again, inviting you to, again, look at it from the outside perspective for just a moment. And these terms, yes, these terms don't feel good, right? Narcissist, gaslighting, all of these terms. And what I invite you to do is to stop thinking about how triggered you get when you hear these terms, and to stop and think about, why are they saying these terms? What is it about this term and the definition of this term that they feel they have to use it for? What is happening beneath that label of gaslighting or narcissist or what have you? What is the behavior beneath that, right? So for it, as an example, when I was a child, right, I would have an experience, and it could be anything from, someone at school bullying me or getting a bad grade at school, to my friends didn't like me or my friends upset me, to my parents were fighting and I got upset. I mean, a host of different things, right? That we as parents go, well, that was just a drop in the bucket. That was like no real, my goodness, that's no real big thing. You want to talk about big things? Let's talk about big things. I hear that often from estranged parents. And I'm inviting you to think about this from the perspective of a child, right? They don't have our life experience. They don't have they can't see the big picture because they're a child. They haven't had this life experience yet. So to them, it is huge. So I would have these experiences in life, which would then give me feelings. And more often than not, if it's an experience that was big to me, it would cause a big emotion. And then I would express that big emotion. And then I would get words from my mom or my dad. And for me, my typical go-to big emotion was anger. I would get really mad when things, quote unquote, this is the words of my mom, right? When things didn't go my way. And it wasn't, looking back now and after years of therapy, it wasn't that they didn't go my way. It was because I was hurt. Emotionally, my heart was hurting. And so I would express it by anger. And because anger is such a huge, big emotion that causes most people to want to run in the opposite direction, I had no one. I always felt abandoned. There was no one to sit with me in my pain. There was very little time did my mom come up and hug me and say, I understand that you're hurt and I am so sorry that you're hurting, and let me scream and cry and carry on or whatever the case may be. She wouldn't do that. And so I learned over the years that, number one, abandonment was a thing. And I to expect that because that's what my quote unquote primary caregiver did, right? They abandoned me when I had big emotions. And then it fueled my anger for a very long time. I was a very angry person up until my mid-40s. I was very angry. And through therapy, through being seen, heard, and validated for all of those emotions and feelings, I no longer have, 95% of my anger has just absolutely dissipated. So what I'm telling you is that beneath the surface, this kind of ties into something else that another episode that I'll do in the future, is when we see these big emotions from our children and they're cursing at us and they're yelling at us and they're doing all these things, that's just a symptom. Those big emotions that you're seeing and hearing from them, that's just a symptom. What is really bothering them is beneath the surface of that. It's just a mask. My anger was a mask that I would wear because beneath my anger was hurt and pain and feeling like I had been abandoned. And my mother never, not once, intended that to happen. But that is what my experience was. That's what I felt. And I turned around and I did very similar things to my children. right? Because no one saw and listened and validated my own hurts and pains and my own anger, right? Then I was not willing to have my kids be angry either. And anytime they were angry, I shut them down. And so that's what I'm talking about when things are beneath the surface. Anger is nothing but a mask, generally. I won't say that. Anger can be a mask to cover deeply held hurts and pain. And typically it's emotional stuff, right? It's not physical stuff for our children. Anger can also be, and just so you know, anger is a very valid emotion. Anger can be life-saving for us, right? If we get, if we can get in touch with our anger, it can get us out of situations that are not healthy for us. And what comes to mind for me with that is a domestic violence situation. Is to, getting angry about being abused can be the fuel we need to get out of an abusive relationship. And for women, most women are, and at least in the U.S. here, are told not to be angry, that good women, nice women, aren't angry women. So anyway, we have these feelings, we have this experience, we have these feelings, and then something is said over the years to us as children from our parents that cause us to have these continued hurts and pains, just, the scab ripped off over and over and over again. And then our children finally get to the place where they have the straw that broke the camel's back moment, and they're like, I'm done. I'm just done. They've just reached that point where they're like, I cannot do this one more minute. And while they may not say that in that way, and they may curse at you and cuss at you and call you everything under the sun and all of those things, it's not because they hate you. They may say they hate you, but all of that is stuff that's covering what's underneath the surface. And if we can get back in touch with that as parents, if we can look at our children, our adult children, as the very hurt little children, then maybe we can have some compassion for them. Now, does that mean that you tolerate abuse? Absolutely not. As a parent, you're entitled to have your boundaries just as your adult child is entitled to have their own. However, boundaries are meant to help guide and protect and serve good. They're not meant to build up walls and to keep people out and forever condemn them and, point the finger and judge and blame and all this other stuff. That's not what they're for. So I invite you to consider, and I know that if you're anything like me, I certainly could not do it in the moment, right? If my kids and my oldest was really pretty vicious, and a lot of the things that she said to me off and on during the course of our estrangement, in the moment I could not see her hurt little child inside, right? When she's spewing venom at me, I could not do that. But I invite you, when you're able to step back from that, when you're not in the middle of it, step back and just ask yourself, what could she possibly be hurting from? What could he possibly have experienced when he was a child and ended up being hurt from? Right? And see if you can see it from their perspective. Take yourself out of it. Take yourself out of that perspective. Not, well, I wouldn't have been hurt by that. No. That's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to see it just as you would from a friend's perspective, right? Or a coworker or a sibling, right? their experience is different than yours. Your experience is different than theirs. And to try to see it through their lens and not yours. And then my invitation to you, and I know that I'm going to get some pushback on this, and I just invite you. You don't have to do it, but I invite you to view what your children, your adult children, are doing and saying as estrangement. I invite you to view that as an opportunity in disguise. And I know, I know you're going, what the hell, Kreed? This is not an opportunity for anything but bad. And I'm here to tell you that is not true. It's not true. Does it hurt? Yes. Does it suck? Yes. Is it fair? No. Is it painful and puts you in the throes of depression and all of that? Yes. I'm not saying it doesn't. But I am telling you, I viewed when I was able to get myself out of depression, and again, the one way I was able to do that, two ways. But one, I got curious and I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so I got curious and I got myself into therapy. I couldn't do it by myself. I could not do it by myself. I couldn't do it with friends because they had not been there. And the ones that had been there were in just as much misery as I was, and neither one of us were helping the other one. So I got myself into therapy. And then I was able to see, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. My children, through our estrangement and reconciliation, handed me the keys to the castle. And what castle, do you ask? My inner castle. My inner castle. And it was up to me to take those keys and put it in the lock, to turn it, to open the door, and to walk in. And I know in the beginning of my estrangement, in the middle of my, in the throes of my estrangement, I didn't know how to take the keys and how to walk through the door. I did not. But it was through therapy. And this is what I'm trying to help you with through this podcast, is to help you to entertain a different perspective. Because I'm here to tell you, these adult children that are reaching out to me through this podcast, the very first thing they say to me is, I really hesitated in listening to your podcast because it was a podcast from an estranged mom. And all groups and things along that line that it's by an estranged parent do nothing but slam the adult children. So I was really hesitant to listen. Number two, I'm glad I listened because you get it. And folks, I'm not here to, I don't have all the answers. I'm not perfect. I still make mistakes. I just saw my daughter on Friday, one of my daughters on Friday. And when I left after visiting with her, I was like, well, hell, I probably shouldn't have said this and that and the other thing. But I'm learning, and thank God that I'm able to say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have talked that much about such and such, right? And that I'm given the grace because my kids now see that I'm willing to own up to my shit. I'm willing to own my mistakes. I'm willing to see my mistakes. I'm willing to entertain the fact that I make mistakes. And they see that. And that's what these adult children are saying when they reach out and contact me. Is, I wish my mom would have some self-reflection like you've done. I wish my mom or my dad, I typically hear about moms. I've yet to hear from an adult child who was estranged from a father and talked about the father. But I wish my mom would listen to your podcast and get something out of it. And again, I'm not saying this because I have all the answers. I don't. But if you remember, in a couple of other episodes, I've talked about the fact that I too have been an estranged adult child several different times in my life. And I remember the pain of not being heard, recognized, and validated for what I was feeling. And that pain stays with me, obviously, because I'm emotional yet again. That pain has stayed with me. I will be 53 years old next month. I'm here to tell you that your estranged adult children, for the most part, and I'm not talking about everyone, there are exceptions to everything in life, right? There are some estranged adult children that have, mental illness or some sort of other catastrophic thing happening in their life that is posing this. But even in some of the most egregious relationships and things that people have done, I still believe that there is a hurt and traumatized child within. And that is who you see yelling at you, screaming at you, calling you names, those types of things. Because just as much pain as you have as an estranged parent, I'm here to tell you your estranged adult children have just as much pain. And just as much as you have anger and you have the attitude of screw them, it's their fault, I've done nothing wrong, I was a good parent. Those are all of your defense mechanisms. Your children have their own defense mechanisms to keep them from being further hurt. And your defense mechanisms are keeping you from being further hurt. So it's two sides of the same coin, varying degrees. And again, as I circle back around, healthy relationships do not end up in estrangement. They just don't. Healthy relationships want to be in connection with one another. So I invite you to see if you can take this challenge that you have in your life right now, called estrangement, and see if you can view it as an opportunity to learn more about yourself and learn more about your estranged adult child from beneath the surface. It's an invitation. You don't have to take me up on it, ever. You may not want to take me up on it right now, and maybe down the road you will change your mind. But, and again, as I typically say, if what you are doing is working for you, and you have love and peace and joy and happiness in your life, then by all means, keep on keeping on. But if there is a part of you that is not happy and is not feeling peace and joy and love in your life, then I invite you to look at this differently. If we go back to the original first quote that I said today, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. I changed the way I looked at estrangement and therefore my children. And that's when my life changed for the better. That's when my relationship with my adult children came back together. And that's when our relationship looks 180-degree difference than what it did. Again, an invitation. I do want to close with reading something from that was written by Vanessa Bennett, who is a mother and psychotherapist. I follow her on Instagram. And while her daughter is still yet a toddler, and she hasn't gone through all the throes of motherhood, I think that what she says here is profound. And it is something that I agree with. So I will close out this episode with this from Vanessa Bennett. Parenthood allows us a mirror to see into the shadow, the deepest parts of ourselves, yet to be examined and integrated. There are parts of myself that I swore I had worked through that have bubbled back up. There are parts of myself that I never knew existed that I am becoming acquainted with. There are moments of emotions and reactions that feel like they are so big and new that they are not mine. Like some alien life force has inhabited my body for just a moment. This journey of self-exploration is a lifelong one, and anyone can be on it, children or not. But as someone who never saw themselves as a mother, now realizing with how much force motherhood thrusts you into your darkest corners, into your most painful emotions, into moments of shame and anger, and on the brink of madness that nothing else has ever quite accomplished. I sit here and look at her in awe and can only manage to say thank you. Thank you to my guru who has come into this life as a tiny and opinionated human being. I am up for the challenge. End quote. I hope you're up for the challenge. And your adult child is just as valuable and lovable as they were when they were a toddler. That toddler is still inside, and that toddler is the one who is crying out for your love and affection and validation. I hope that you'll join me on helping to set the course to show them the way of forgiveness, the way of acceptance. So this brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent and that you're able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you have received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us on social media, sharing this podcast with others, or perhaps leaving us a positive review. On social media, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Until next time.